An elderly woman's quiet shopping trip took a shocking turn when a towering thief tried to snatch her purse. But he didn't count on her fiercely protective son stepping in to deliver a lesson he'll never forget. It was a breezy Saturday afternoon in Richmond, Virginia, at the corner of Magnolia Avenue and Eastwood Drive, where a small, family-owned convenience store had served the neighborhood for over 50 years. The store was a humble, yet familiar place, with shelves neatly stocked with essentials ranging from canned goods to candy bars, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air. Among the handful of shoppers that day was Mrs. Agnes Harper, a petite, soft-spoken woman in her late 70s. Agnes's presence was easy to notice, not because of her size, but because of the kindness she seemed to exude. Dressed in a floral print dress and carrying a simple handbag, she moved carefully through the store, pausing to study prices and select the few items she needed. Her grocery list was modest, reflecting her frugal lifestyle. A loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, and her favorite brand of tea were all she planned to buy that day. Agnes lived simply but happily, finding joy in the little things. She hummed quietly to herself as she shopped, completely unaware that someone had been watching her since she entered the store. At the end of the aisle stood a man who looked distinctly out of place. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers. His eyes darted around the store, his movements restless, like a predator sizing up its prey. It was clear he wasn't there to shop. His gaze locked on Agnes and her small handbag, which dangled loosely from her wrist. But Agnes wasn't entirely alone that day. Outside, in an old but reliable pickup truck, sat her son, Travis. At 45, Travis Harper had inherited his mother's protective instincts, but expressed them with a commanding presence and unflinching resolve. He had grown up watching Agnes work tirelessly to support him and his siblings, and now, as an adult, he made it his mission to ensure his mother lived comfortably and safely. Travis had just parked the truck after running an errand nearby, deciding to wait for his mother to finish shopping. From his vantage point, he could see her moving through the store's aisles, and a fond smile spread across his face as he watched her deliberate over her choices. The moment of peace didn't last. Travis's attention was drawn to a figure inside the store, moving oddly. The man loitered near Agnes, pretending to browse the shelves, but staying unnervingly close. Travis's smile faded, and his protective instincts kicked in. He narrowed his eyes, watching the scene unfold with growing unease. Something didn't feel right. He opened the truck door, his heartbeat quickening, and stepped out, keeping his eyes locked on the glass storefront. Inside, Agnes reached for a box of tea, her hands trembling slightly. Arthritis had made such tasks more challenging, but she managed with determination. The man took a step closer, his intent now unmistakable. Travis, watching from just outside the entrance, felt his chest tighten. He pushed the door open, the small bell above it jingling loudly, causing the man to flinch and glance over his shoulder. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Travis's expression left no room for doubt. He knew something was wrong. The man quickly turned his attention back to Agnes, who was now at the checkout counter, placing her items on the belt. The cashier, a young man named Jacob, greeted her with a polite smile as he began scanning her groceries. Agnes returned the smile, her demeanor as warm as ever, even to strangers. That's when the man made his move. In a sudden burst of aggression, he stepped forward and grabbed Agnes's handbag, yanking it hard. The strap pulled tight against her wrist, and she stumbled slightly, a startled gasp escaping her lips. The sound was enough to draw everyone's attention, including Travis's. From the doorway, Travis saw his mother's frail figure jerk backward as she clung desperately to her bag. Without hesitation, he charged forward, his voice booming through the small store. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" The man froze, turning just enough to see Travis barreling toward him. The sheer force of Travis's presence caused everyone else in the store to step back, but the thief tightened his grip on the handbag and yanked harder. Agnes refused to let go, her voice trembling but firm as she cried out, "Let go of my purse." Travis reached them in seconds, his hand clamping down on the man's arm with a grip like iron. "I said, let go," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The man hesitated, his eyes darting between Agnes and Travis. Though he was big, easily over 250 pounds, Travis was no pushover. Years of hard work in construction had left him with the kind of strength that demanded respect. "Mind your business," the man spat, his lips curling into a sneer. "This ain't got nothing to do with you." "That's my mother," Travis said coldly, his voice like ice. "You just made it my business." The tension in the store was palpable. Agnes stumbled backward, clutching her handbag tightly to her chest, her breaths coming in short, shaky bursts. "Are you okay, Mom?" Travis asked without taking his eyes off the man. His tone was calm, but the fury simmering underneath was unmistakable. "I'm fine, baby," Agnes managed to say, her voice quivering. "Just be careful." The man, now visibly agitated, squared up to Travis. He wasn't ready to back down, despite the growing odds against him. With a sharp twist, he tried to wrench his arm free, but Travis didn't let go. Their bodies were tense, bracing for a confrontation. The other shoppers watched in stunned silence, some pulling out their phones, but unsure whether to intervene or record the unfolding drama. The man lunged suddenly, aiming to shove Travis out of the way, but Travis sidestepped the attack with practiced ease, using the thief's momentum against him. The man stumbled forward, crashing into a shelf of potato chips. Bags tumbled to the floor as he regained his footing, his face twisted in rage. Travis stepped in front of Agnes, planting himself firmly between her and the would-be thief. "You're not touching her," Travis said, his voice steady but fierce. The man charged again, swinging wildly. Travis ducked, his reflexes sharp, and countered with a solid punch to the man's gut. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he doubled over, gasping. "You don't mess with family," Travis said, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. Despite the beating, the man wasn't ready to give up. He grabbed a glass bottle from a nearby shelf and swung it toward Travis. Agnes let out a horrified scream as Jacob ducked behind the counter. Travis managed to block the blow, his forearm taking the brunt of the impact. Pain shot through him, but he didn't falter. With a swift movement, he wrenched the bottle from the man's hand and tossed it aside. Then, with one final, decisive punch, he sent the thief sprawling to the floor. The man groaned, slumping against the tiles, defeated. For a moment, no one moved. The only sounds were Agnes's shaky breathing and the faint hum of the store's air conditioning. Travis stood over the man, his chest heaving, his fists still clenched. "You done?" he asked, his tone cold and unforgiving. The man didn't respond, but the fight in his eyes was gone. He nodded weakly, too winded and bruised to argue further. Jacob, the young cashier, finally found the courage to move. He reached for the phone behind the counter and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "The police are on their way," he announced, his voice shaky but loud enough for everyone to hear. As sirens echoed in the distance, Agnes reached out to her son, her hand trembling but firm. "Thank you, Travis," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Travis placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now, Mom. That's all that matters." The wail of police sirens grew louder, and within moments, 2 officers entered the store. They quickly assessed the situation, taking in the disheveled man on the floor, the scattered groceries, and the shaken shoppers. One officer approached Travis while the other began securing the thief in handcuffs. "What happened here?" the officer asked, pulling out a notepad. Travis recounted the events calmly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He pointed to the security cameras mounted near the ceiling and to one of the bystanders who had filmed the altercation on their phone. The officer nodded, jotting down notes as Travis spoke. Meanwhile, Agnes stood nearby, her hands still clutching her handbag as if it were a lifeline. "Ma'am, are you okay?" the second officer asked, his tone gentle. Agnes nodded slowly. "I'm fine, just a little shaken, but I'll be all right." The officer's gaze softened. "You're lucky your son was here," he said. "Things could have gone much worse." As the officers escorted the defeated thief out of the store, Travis kept a protective arm around his mother. The other shoppers began to relax, murmuring among themselves as the tension in the room dissipated. Jacob offered Agnes a glass of water, which she accepted with a grateful smile. "I'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement," the first officer told Travis. "But we appreciate what you did here today. You likely prevented something far worse from happening." Travis nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll be there," he said, his voice firm. But my priority was making sure my mom was safe. Later that evening, after the police had left and the store had returned to a semblance of normalcy, Travis and Agnes sat together in her cozy living room. The day's events had left them both exhausted, but the bond between them felt stronger than ever. Agnes held a warm cup of tea in her hands, her gaze thoughtful as she looked at her son. "You know, I wasn't scared," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Not really. Not with you there." Travis looked at her, his expression tender. "I'm glad I was, Mom, but I hate that you had to go through that at all." Agnes nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Life tests us in unexpected ways, doesn't it? But today reminded me of something important, the strength of family. Travis reached out, placing a hand over hers. "You taught me that, Mom, to stand up for what's right, no matter how hard it gets." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the warmth of their connection filling the room. For Travis, the day had been a stark reminder of how precious his family was. No matter what challenges came their way, he knew they'd face them together, with courage, love, and unwavering strength.